how would you describe him? This is a man who writes theatre, who writes plays. This man loves comedies. Hi everyone, welcome back to John Florio channel. I am Mary and I'm here to talk about the great John Florio. Hi guys, how are you? I hope that you are fine. I'm here today to discuss an important topic, possibly the most important topic regarding Shakespeare and John Florio. Shakespeare Library. We know that in Shakespeare's testament, his last will, he mentions no books. Actually, this is not unusual for the time, but what was unusual and exceptional was John Florio's testament, in which he mentions 340 books. Why was exceptional? Well, at the time, books were very expensive. Just to have one book in your house, it meant a lot. Florio, as other writers, borrowed books from their colleagues. This is something that John Florio mentions in his works. He most certainly borrowed books from the library of the Earl of Southampton, Henry Wriothesley, when Henry was his patron from 1591 to 1598. But most importantly, John Florio was a voracious reader. He owned books, he loved books, he annotated his books, and he had a collection of 340 books. When in his testament John Florio mentions his books, so he decided to bequeath his library to William Herbert, the third Earl of Pembroke. This document that I will show you is from my private archive. It's the holographic testament written by John Florio's hand. So in 1625, as death approached, Florio left his vast book collection to William Herbert, the third Earl of Pembroke. His will mentions 340 books in Italian, French, and Spanish, plus unbound manuscripts. So he urged the Pembroke to house them at Wilton or Barnard Castle. But something strange happened. For uncertain reasons that we still don't know today, William Herbert decided to renounce the execution of John Florio's will, and his library, along with his manuscripts, vanished and disappeared. Today, we don't know where John Florio's books are, and we don't know where his manuscripts are. In his testament, he mentions Italian, Spanish, and French books, but we know the exact number of Italian books that he owned. Why? Because he mentions this book in his two Italian-English dictionaries as the source that he used to create new English words. Don't forget that John Florio is the third most important lexicographer in English language. So Florio mentions in 1598 in A World of Words a list of 71 Italian books. He cited them all. And in 611, the second edition of his dictionary that he dedicated to Queen Anne, he mentions 252 books. So you understand that the Italian books were the major part of Florio's library. Now, I did a research. I can't wait to publish this article. It will be out very soon. But in the meantime, I want to show you to my community of John Florio Society the results of this research that I have done of John Florio's library. It is something that none has ever done before. I decided to study each Italian book the Florio cited, and I divided each book by genre, which is the result of John Florio's Italian library. And why it is important? Well, when Shakespeare scholars mention the source of Shakespeare plays, the majority are Italian books, that some of them were not translated into English when Shakespeare read them. When they cite these Italian books for Romeo and Juliet, Merchant of Venice, Two Gentlemen of Verona, Boccaccio, the Commedia dell'arte, Cinzio, Bandello, they sometimes cite John Florio's library. And they write, yes, well, possibly this book Shakespeare had the opportunity to read it thanks to John Florio, who owned this book in his library. And the same John Florio's library has been often described as the source for Shakespeare plays. The books that Florio owned, used by Shakespeare for his plays, and Florio used as intermediary, someone who helped translated the plot to his friend Shakespeare. So I decided to divide this John Florio's Italian library by genre, all the 252 books. And the result the majority of John Florio's Italian books were theatrical plays. Also, I also divided the plays by genre, so comedies, tragedies, and the major number of plays owned by Florio were comedies. Of course, there are also tragedies and pastoral. The majority of them are comedies. The total number of plays owned by Florio is 46 plays. It's such a huge number if you think about it. 46 plays. What did these men do with all these plays? Some examples of the plays, of the comedies, tragedies, and pastoral comedies owned by Florio, and that we find as a source for Shakespeare plays. Let's read some of them. La Pellegrina, La Cortigiana by Pietro Aretino, reflecting Florio's interest in explicit erotic themes, 4 tragedies, 4 pastorals, many commedia dell'arte plays. Gli Inganni, for example, that was used as a source for Twelfth Night. The second genre that contains the greatest number of books owned in John Florio's Italian library are novels. The number of Italian novels owned by Florio is 42, and among them, of course, the novels used as a source for Shakespeare library. For example, Gli Ecatomiti by Battista Giraldi Giovanni Cinzio, Boccaccio's Decameron, translated by Florio in 1620, different editions of Dante Divina Commedia. Another great feature of John Florio's Italian library is the number of poetry. Florio owned 20 books on poetry, sonnets, madrigals, songs, and of course there are other categories of John Florio's Italian library, and I will reveal the whole collection in my upcoming article, but I wanted to show you a brief preview of this incredible library that shows that this man was mainly interested in theater, novels, and poetry. If we forget about Florio just for a moment, imagine that you find this library and you divide this library by genre, and you find that this man owned plays and then he owned novels and poetry. What would you think of him? How would you describe him? This is a man who writes theater, who writes plays. This man loves comedies. If you didn't know who was the man behind this huge library, you probably would never think of Florio. Because today people associate Florio with the Italian teacher, the Italian lexicographer. But this shouldn't surprise you, because from the beginning of John Florio's career, from his first work, he was 25 years old. And in this work we have dedication by the Laces Company, a theatrical company. And these plays had huge importance in the Elizabethan theatrical network. Just put aside for a moment Shakespeare. Let's focus on Ben Jonson. It is today asserted and confirmed that John Florio collaborated with Ben Jonson for the play Volpone. At the British Library, in the past, a copy of John Florio's Volpone, so a book from John Florio's library, has been found. This book contains a dedication written by the same Ben Jonson. And in the preface of Volpone, he writes a beautiful dedication to John Florio, and he writes these words: "To my loving father and worthy friend, John Florio, the aid of his muses, Ben Jonson seals this testimony of friendship and love." This is an important dedication because it shows you not just that Ben Jonson loved John Florio, and he prized John Florio and he had a huge respect for him, but most importantly implies a suggestion of discipleship. They collaborated, they brought together. And in fact, Volpone is today associated as a play in which both Ben Jonson and John Florio collaborated to write it. And as I told you before, many Shakespeare scholars sometimes cite John Florio's Italian library as a source for Shakespeare plays. Let's make just one example. Twelfth Night. We know that the main source of Twelfth Night is Gli Inganni. Gli Inganni was written by Ludovico Castelvetro. Ludovico Castelvetro was not just a dear friend of John Florio's father, Michelangelo, but Ludovico Castelvetro was also a tutor, the tutor of John Florio when Florio was a child in Soglio in Switzerland. Ludovico Castelvetro wrote Gli Inganni, and this play is in John Florio's Italian library. Twelfth Night has two main sources, Gli Inganni and Giordano Bruno, Il Candelaio, the candle holder, both books that John Florio had and owned. And he also personally knew Giordano Bruno because they lived together at the French embassy from 1583 to 1585. And the same John Florio translated entire words, proverbs from Giordano Bruno, Il Candelaio. These two main sources, Il Candelaio and Gli Inganni, are both from John Florio's library. Both were not translated into English when Shakespeare read them, and they were both used for Twelfth Night. I just wanted to give you one example with Twelfth Night of the source used by Shakespeare and that we find in John Florio's library, in the Italian books owned by Florio, and they were not translated into English when Shakespeare read them. I could take any other Shakespeare play and show you that each one of Shakespeare plays has at least one source that we find in John Florio's Italian library. I demonstrated with this research that John Florio's Italian library consisted mainly of theatrical plays. Why does this matter? It matters a lot, especially if we think of John Florio as a mere lexicographer. We know now that he wasn't just a mere lexicographer, that he worked with theatrical companies since his young age. That since he was 25 years old, he collaborated and was involved in writing plays with theatrical companies. The question is why all John Florio's books that we find in his Italian library are later used as a source for Shakespeare plays. If today we find John Florio's library with all his books heavily annotated by him, we would uncover Shakespeare library. We would know how the plot were used, how they were readapted and translated into English. In the description, I will give you the link to the full list of Italian books owned by John Florio. Florio's library is the key to understand how Shakespeare wrote his plays, and most importantly, how Italian literature, Italian theatre shaped English theatre, English Renaissance, and the works of Shakespeare himself. To not mention your books in a testament was not unusual, but what was unusual was John Florio's library, an exceptional list of plays that were used as a source for Shakespeare library. Stay resolute. Bye.